Hey there, this is Elizabeth, the teaching artist for the Timken Museum of Art, with another art tutorial for you. Today we're going to be drawing a tiger. I got a request from one of you guys for a tiger drawing, so here we go. This is an example of what you're going to draw. Please don't be scared by the complexity of this drawing because I'm going to take you through step by step just how to make your drawing look similar to mine. For today's project, all you will need is a pencil and paper. And this is the image that we're going to be drawing from. It'll be present in every slide for you to refer to. All right, let's get started. The first thing you're going to draw is a circle in the center of your paper, maybe a little bit right of center. Once you draw the circle, I want you to overlap it with a rounded rectangle. Notice that it's overlapping in the bottom right quarter of the circle you just drew. Inside that rounded rectangle, you're going to draw an oval on the right half. The oval fits inside the rounded rectangle and there's a little bit of space left over where we're going to put the nose. Now, at the bottom right corner of that oval inside the rounded rectangle, you will draw a rounded triangle with a little curved shape on top and then a curly Q that overlaps the rounded triangle. Next, we're going to make the tiger look like it's snarling by adding the wrinkles on top of his nose. So what you're seeing me do here is draw a couple of lines on top of the nose that we will shade later to make it feel like the snout is being scrunched up. After that, we're going to go for the opening of the mouth. It's a curved V shape, upside down V shape. Next, we're going to add a few lines that indicate the gums of the mouth and then the outer stripe on the outer edge of the mouth. These just follow along, matching the lines I am drawing with your own. Initially, our drawing will consist of basic shapes and will not look like the eventual tiger. We must build a foundation of structure that details can be applied to later. So now match that diagonal line I drew from the top of the nose through the head. This line is going to help us place our eye and our ear. So above the line close to the nose, draw that skinny triangle shape. Underneath that triangle, draw a half circle with another small triangle in the corner. Next, lightly draw an oval above the eye and then give me a curved line from the top of the nose up to the top of the head. From there, you're going to create another line from the top of that oval to the back of the head. That's going to be the crease that you can see on the top of the tiger's head. And then we're going to place the ear shape where that diagonal line will pass through the upper third of the ear. Just mimic this shape you've seen me draw here and make sure it overlaps the head and doesn't fall along the outside edge of the head. That's a common mistake. Next, we're just going to add the bottom of the head into the neck. And then we're going to move back to the mouth and add some fangs. So just give me some rounded triangles for those. And be sure they overlap. One is in front of the other. So you're not seeing the whole second tooth on the upper and lower parts of the mouth. Everything's going to fit inside that original rounded rectangle that you drew. Next, we're going to go for the back molars. Notice the irregular edge at the top of these teeth, and one is bigger than the other. After that, we're going to add a little dip on the top of the mouth to indicate gums, and draw a line that indicates the outer edge of the tongue. Next, we're going to erase away any unneeded lines and add an oval behind the eye. That's going to be that white patch that you can see in the photo. Next, you will draw a line from the top right of the ear to meet with the beginning of the nose. This is for the side of the head. And then you'll draw a diagonal line from the top of the ear off the page. This is the top of the neck. Next, we will draw the tuft of hair coming off the face and neck using these zigzag lines, very loose. We're going to use shading later to make those more apparent. And then we're going to move back to the mouth and draw in that dark shape that's surrounding the upper part of the mouth. Then we're going to move to the nose. We're going to shade in that triangle shape that we initially drew that represents the underneath of the nose. I'm redefining my lines a little bit around the nose. And then I'm going to shade the inside of the nostril lighter than that dark triangle. I'm adding shading in those creases to make it look like his snout is scrunched up in a snarl. And then I'll add a little bit of shading on the nose itself. Moving back to the mouth, I'm going to shade in that shape we just drew that surrounds the mouth. It's fur around the mouth, whereas what I just shaded in there is the gums. So the fur has a dark pigment to it, and the gums are dark, but they're not as dark as the pigment in the fur around the mouth. Next, we put a line through the tongue, and we indicate shading behind the teeth that indicates underneath the tongue. Now we're shading in the tongue a little bit lighter than everything else we've shaded so far, and use our finger to blend. I also added a little bit of shading to the teeth because the teeth are not going to be perfectly white. Next, we're going to move back up to the eye and begin shading the shapes and shadows around the eye. So look carefully. There's triangle shape in the corner. There's a triangle shape above the eye, which need to get shaded in and refined. You'll be refining your drawing the whole time. I'm starting to add some of the patterns on the tiger. Then I add a little bit of shading underneath the eye, and then I'm adding a pupil. Just drop it kind of straight down from the upper lid, and then shade in the eye. A tiger is not going to have a white of an eye like a human will. Their eyes are different. Now what you're seeing me do is we're creating more shading because the tiger is brown with black spots and white highlights. So anywhere where it's that brown color, I'm going to be shading it in a medium color. And now what you're seeing me do is adding those little polka dots that all those whiskers come out of. So just draw them in line with each other, and then draw the whiskers sprouting out from each one of those polka dots. Now coming back up to the upper part of the head, I'm starting to draw the patterns that are found on the tiger, the spots and the stripes. I'm literally drawing what I see in the photo. Please use the photo as a reference always, whenever you're drawing anything realistic. And what you're going to see me do is draw the basic shape of the stripe or spot, and then I shade it in a motion that indicates the direction of the fur. I'm not going as dark as I eventually will, because right now I'm essentially plotting all of these different spots and stripes that I will then come back over later with and make darker where need be. Don't get too dark too soon in a drawing. It's always harder to erase than it is to make things darker. Now I'm noticing the outer tip of the ear is darker. I'm noticing the spots coming out from underneath the ear. I'm shading in the ear. There's a lot of dark values in there comparatively to the rest of the tiger. And I'm going to shade in that whole back area of his neck and the upper part of his leg and chest across his head, using the side of my pencil, shading very lightly, and then using my hands to then blend it and smudge it so it creates an even value throughout. All of this is moving in the direction of how I imagine the fur working when it comes to the direction of my pencil strokes. And then on top of some of that shading, I start adding more tiger stripes. I pay attention to where the stripes get thinner and thicker, and when I shade them in, I shade them in the direction of the fur. You don't want to be shading it in opposite directions, because then it will move away from the feeling that it is a furry subject. Always be referring back to the photo to figure out what the shapes should be, where they should be placed, and how light or dark you want to be shading things in. Notice that it takes layers to get to the darks and the mediums. We're going to come back with an eraser for the lights. But right now we're going for the darkest values. We've already got the medium values by shading over the entire animal and then smudging it with our fingers. So now I'm coming back in and I'm shading in where I can get the darkest. Remember, your darks are always built with layers. Don't go to the dark too fast, because sometimes you'll get so dark that it'll interfere with the rest of your drawing. You have to think very carefully where your darkest darks go and your lightest lights in any drawing that you do. So to stay around a medium value at first and then get darker and then get lighter is the best approach. So what I need you to do now is just mimic what you see me doing. Whenever you need to pause the video throughout this entire tutorial, please pause it. The theory behind what I'm doing, however, is what I've just stated. You keep everything around a medium value, and then you come back in and you deepen your darks, you refine the drawing, and the last thing that we'll be doing in this picture is pulling out the lights with our eraser. The lights are like dessert. Think of them as something that you have last. In this tutorial, you are watching how a realistic drawing is built. I think sometimes people get frustrated because their drawings don't look like they want them to quick enough. But drawings take time to build. Even someone who draws really well doesn't have a realistic drawing within the first 5 minutes of working on it. Like you could see in this tutorial, initially it was just all those basic shapes. It didn't even look like a tiger. But over time, when you have the patience and you go through the steps, you realize that you have to think of drawing as structure first and then details on top. So now I'm finally getting to some of the erasing for the highlights. I'm going to be erasing in the direction of the fur, just like I was doing with the shading. I'm going to come back in and do any kind of refinement I feel is necessary in the drawing itself. And I'm not going to have too many areas with the white of the paper showing through. Your highlights will have more impact if you don't have too many of them. Only add those light lights where you see from your reference those light lights exist. So for us, it's on that neck and above the eye. Those are our lightest areas. Just because light hits an area, however, does not make it white. If you look at the light hitting on the back of his neck, it's a lighter brown, but it's not white. That's also a common mistake folks make. So even though I erase a little, doesn't mean that I can't come back in and add some more marks, especially with those tufts of fur coming off the side of his neck and head. So I erased away in the direction of the fur, and then I came back in and added extra strokes. Now I'm doing some detailing around the ear, coming back into the light tufted area on the side of his head and neck, darkening a little bit more in areas where I feel like it could get darker. I'm using my finger to soften certain areas. The focal point of this picture is definitely the tiger's head. So the rest of his body needs to kind of disappear and not attract too much attention. So by making the values a little closer together, so not a strong dark next to a strong light, I decrease the attention that is attracted. So that's what I'm talking about for the back end of this drawing. Keeping the values closer together and then having strong contrast with my values in the areas where I want to call attention to the drawing. Sometimes it's called a focal point. I like to call it an entry point or emphasis in a drawing. Now moving to the whiskers, I'm using the edge of my eraser to pull away different whiskers coming out of those polka dots we drew earlier, and then I'll come back with my pencil and draw them so they're a little more distinct. But the eraser created the white that I needed because the whiskers coming off the tiger are in fact white. Now I'm pulling off my final light off the side of his neck. And we're good. That's it. We finished the drawing. Congratulations, you stuck with it. I hope you've learned something that you can apply to the next drawing that you do. And thank you so much for taking the time to be creative today. Please email us a picture of what you've made, and be safe and be well.